How is a divorce coach any different than a mediator? And should you hire one? This is a popular question because the role of an attorney is pretty clear in divorce, and even the role of a mediator is pretty clear in divorce. And I would add that the role of a therapist is pretty apparent in divorce, but not a divorce coach. It's a professional that many people haven't worked with before. Admittedly, a lot of other divorce professionals don't even really know what we do, and yet working with a divorce coach can be the difference between a high conflict divorce and a much more amicable divorce. So I typically talk about what I do in terms of the 4 dimensions of divorce. There's 2 very common ones, legal and financial, and many people are familiar with these. Your attorney is there by and large to help you navigate that legal dimension of divorce. There's documentation that needs to be filed. There's a process that needs to be followed. Ultimately, a judge needs to sign off on your separation agreement. So there's a legal component. And in some cases, you may need an attorney to advise and guide you on that process, as well as to understand what your legal rights are, because you want to be informed about that. In terms of the financial component, many attorneys provide support for this too, even though they're not financial professionals. And there are others in this process, like a certified divorce financial analyst, whose role is very specifically to help you navigate the financial portion of divorce. It can be complicated to separate all of your property and your assets. You may own a business together. You may have a primary residence together. You may have investments, potentially a pension account. You may own property out of state. How do you value all these things? Stock options. Sometimes, depending on the complexity of your situation, you might need a financial expert. Now, a mediator, back to the original question, is oftentimes someone whose role is to be a neutral, meaning that they don't represent you or your spouse. They're neutral. They provide structure for the 2 of you to agree on the legal. Hold on a second. Morning. They provide structure for you and your spouse to agree on the legal and the financial parameters of your divorce, basically what goes into your separation agreement. And that is their role, by and large. There may be a small opportunity for education while you're working with them, but primarily they're there to sit down with the 2 of you and to provide structure and to help you to navigate any areas where you may be in disagreement and you 2 can't quite come to an eye-to-eye agreement on the terms of your separation. Good morning.
Or even
So the mediator's role in this process is really just to help you come to agreement. And this is the way that most mediation is structured, is you and your spouse will attend, either in person or virtually, a meeting with that mediator with the explicit goal of coming to an agreement on the terms of your divorce or some component of your divorce, whether it's parenting schedules, whether it's child support, whether it's how you're kind of separating your assets and your liabilities. And yet there are 2 other large and very important components of divorce that attorneys, financial professionals, and mediators don't help with. And this is the emotional component of divorce and the relational component of divorce. Now, you get some overlap here with a therapist, because a therapist will help you to navigate that emotional component of divorce. They will help you process your anger, process your grief, understand your emotions, have a healthier response to your emotions, which oftentimes are overwhelming, to potentially work with the stress that's impacting your sleep and your work performance and your health. It's not uncommon for people to lose a tremendous amount of weight as they go through divorce. And yet, there's a lot of stress involved in divorce, a lot of emotions that a therapist can't help with because it's not about emotional processing. It's about unanswered questions. You may have questions about how this process is going to go and what it's going to cost, and if the two of you are going to be able to get through it amicably, whether you're going to be able to have a decent relationship on the other side. You may have some questions if things have been pretty high conflict leading up to this point about what you're legally required to pay in terms of child support or alimony. Or maybe your spouse has made some threats about your involvement with the kids and whether you'll have any custody or time with the kids, or maybe that they want to take the kids and move out of state. And so a lot of these unanswered questions become very overwhelming very quickly. And they get in the way of you really being able to think about your future and to be able to act more logically and strategically throughout this divorce process. And no amount of talking to a therapist is going to answer these questions. What you need now is to talk to different professionals, potentially a legal professional or a financial professional, maybe even someone who handles mortgages or health insurance, someone who can advise on co-parenting strategies. And that is part of the role, one of the big roles of a divorce coach, is to not only help you recognize all of these unanswered questions, but to get them organized and to get you connected with professionals that can provide answers. Because when you start to get answers to all of these unanswered questions, the stress level goes down. You suddenly get your brain back. You start sleeping better. You've got more energy. And you're less scared and more centered, which is a great place to be as you navigate the divorce process, especially because you're making decisions that are going to impact you and your spouse and your children for the rest of your life. And now there's a fourth component, right? The relational component. And this is another area where divorce coaches really shine. If you're watching my videos, you know, my assumption is that you're not pursuing a scorched earth divorce. You're wanting to do this as amicably as possible. And to do that, you and your spouse have to be able to talk. You have to be able to agree. And that's not always easy. And oftentimes you're still living in the same house with this person while you're getting divorced, potentially while you're parenting your kids. And that's tough too. And so a divorce coach can help guide you on how to interact with your spouse. Can a therapist do this? Sure, but a divorce coach does it with an eye towards the work to be done, which is crafting your separation agreement. You know, if conversation and interactions with your spouse are challenging right now, you're going to be tempted to withdraw and to pull back and to create some space for yourself. But when you do that, your communication tends to break down and it's hard to warm it up again later. And so that's dangerous because if the two of you stop communicating, then typically attorneys have to step in and communicate for you. Cost goes up, conflict goes up. And so you need to stay in communication with this person, and yet you may find that your interactions and conversations with them are triggering and stressful and not something that you really want to do. So a divorce coach can help you to do that dance as well as possible, where you don't back away so much that communication breaks down, but you don't move in and get too close that you continue to get burned. You need to find that happy medium. And this is very tactical because every week is something new. And so oftentimes people find it very, very helpful to have support, to say, what's on deck this week? What conversations do I need to have with my spouse this week? What do I need to better understand about the divorce process this week? How do I need to prepare for conversations or consultations with other divorce professionals? What decisions do I or we need to make this week? And so divorce coaching on a week-to-week basis really focuses on that in terms of what's on deck, what needs to happen this next week, and then we meet a week later and say, how did that go? What's next? And I will tell you that many people say this is the invaluable support that they got from working with a divorce coach because they had a thought partner. They had a co-pilot. They were no longer in this alone. When they had questions or concerns, they had someone to talk to, not with the expectation that that person always has the answers, but knowing that that person can help connect them to resources that can provide the answers. So hopefully this has been helpful in terms of answering what a divorce coach does. It's different from a mediator. You're going to sit down with a mediator usually for 4 to 8 hours to have a big conversation and come to an agreement. Working with a divorce coach is more of a long-term relationship. We'll work together typically 2 to 3 months to hold your hand and help guide you on this challenging journey. If you want to learn more, check out my website, bestpossibledivorce.com.